Hello, my name is Noel. I'll be doing my Monroe sequence speech on pet shelters and pet adoptions. If you go to the first slide, please. So, how many of you own a dog or a cat? And how many of you could tell me where you got your dog or cat? Did you find them online? Did you buy them in a pet store? Did you see an ad in a local newspaper? Did you contact a breeder? Did you even look at a shelter? Did you consider adoption? If you go to the next slide. So more than 7.5 million animals are dropped off at shelters in the United States alone every year. Of that 7.5 million, 2.7 million will end up being euthanized. Euthanized is a fancy word for killed. So 7.5 million dropped off, 2.7 million euthanized. That's about 36%, more than a third. These animals that are euthanized, they're not much different than the dog or cat you own, or the dog and cat you grew up with, or your mom's dog or cat. The only difference is that nobody came to save them. No one rescued them. They just left them in the shelter to die. Next slide, please. So how does this huge number, how does this 7.5 million annually happen? Well, first and foremost, the pet abandonment rate is astronomically high. People abandon their pets for a multitude of reasons, and we'll get into those reasons later. Another reason is that breeders breed these animals for profit. So when you go to a puppy mill or you go to a breeder, what are you actually doing? You're actually going to someone who will force a dog to get pregnant, force a dog to have a litter of puppies, just to sell those puppies as soon as they can for as much money as they can, and then start the process over with re-impregnating the dog, having another litter, which ultimately drives up the number of animals. Another reason that is very easily prevented is that people don't spay or neuter their pets enough. If you spay or neuter your pet, you would greatly reduce the pet population. You'll help control it, and you'll help drive down that 7.5 million annually, which ultimately leads to 2.7 million needless deaths. Now, as for the 2.7 million being euthanized, it's not because the shelters don't care or they just want to. It's a space issue. They don't have enough space to handle the amount of pets that come in every year. They have no choice but to euthanize them. If you go to the next slide, we're going to talk about ways to a solution. How can we help solve this problem? Well, the easiest and top way is to adopt a pet. At least consider adopting a pet rather than buying from a pet store or from a breeder. Even if you have your mind set on that purebred German Shepherd, just like the one you grew up with when you were little, even if that's really what you want, you should really just take the time to go down to the shelter and just have a look. Just see what's there. Just see what animals are there. Maybe, just maybe, you'll find one that your heart just falls in love with, and you can save a life and have a new best friend for the rest of your life. Even if you're not in the market for adopting a pet, you can still help out. You can still foster an animal. Now, what does fostering an animal mean? A foster is a temporary owner of the pet. So you take control, you take care of that pet for a temporary time until the shelter can find a permanent owner. How does this help out the shelter? Well, it helps out first and foremost with the space issue. And it also helps the animal out because it extends the animal's timeline. Where a shelter might give an animal 2 weeks to find an owner to be adopted before it's euthanized, you as a foster can extend that time out indefinitely and to make sure you find the right loving owner for that animal. Another way you can help out is to sponsor a shelter. Sponsoring can be done either by volunteering, spending a few hours of your Saturday down at the shelter helping them out, helping them keep their costs down, or through donations. So we talked earlier about the 2.7 million euthanizations a year. And I want you to go to the next slide. And there's a picture there. And it's a pretty gruesome picture. It's an ugly picture. But sadly, the truth is even uglier than that picture. If you take 2.7 million euthanizations a year, what does that actually break down to? That's 7,000 a day. Over 7,000 a day. That's more than 300 every hour. or 5 every minute. So far, as long as you've been watching the speeds, 25 animals have been euthanized. If you go to the next slide. So, what is it that these animals ultimately did to deserve this most cruel punishment? How did they end up in this position? Well, pet ultimately becomes their owners abandon. And I said before we would go over some of those reasons. Owners abandon their pets for a lot of reasons, but some of the more common ones are the owner moved to a new apartment, new residence, and when they move, their landlord doesn't allow pets, or the place that they found is no longer viable for their pet. Some owners have a big life change. They will get a job that requires them to work more hours and they can't take care of their pet anymore. They'll end their relationship with like a divorce, or their boyfriend or girlfriend will split up and the dog or cat was kind of part of that relationship, so they don't want it anymore. It could be a new family member. Maybe you have a baby. Maybe you have a new spouse, a new boyfriend, girlfriend that doesn't like the animal. So you just give it to a shelter. Another one you'll hear is the dog got too big. These are the people that went out and found that little Saint Bernard puppy and thought it was so cute and cuddly, and then 2 years later they're wondering where that little puppy went, and they have this big dog. And another one is the dogs are too expensive. Some dogs have medical issues. Some dogs need groomed a lot. Some dogs' nails grow too fast. Some dogs, maybe they chewed up your furniture one too many times. The expense is getting too big, so you send them to a shelter. Sadly, most of these reasons, the animals have no control over this. That's not their fault. They didn't make you move. They didn't make your relationship end. They didn't do anything. And that they are going to end up in a shelter, and they have a 36% chance to end up in a trash can like you saw in that picture. So what can you do? You need to be part of the solution. If you hit the next slide. So the bottom line is up front. If you adopt a pet, you're saving a life. If you adopt an animal, that is one animal that will not be euthanized. And if you don't adopt a pet, even if you already have a pet, do not abandon your pet. Alright? I'm in the military. I move a lot. I also have a 75-pound dog. I know it can be difficult to find an apartment or a house or a landlord that is okay with having a big dog. But trust me, they're out there. Alright? Just don't look at 3 different places and they all say, well, you can't have your dog, it's too big, or you can't have your cat, or you can't have 3 animals. Keep searching. Don't be lazy. Look. That apartment and that landlord is out there. Research the type of animal you're getting. I said earlier about the Saint Bernard. Know that a Saint Bernard puppy is going to grow up into a big dog, and no matter what kind of puppy you get or little kitten you get, realize that they're going to get bigger. Don't blame your pets for your relationship ending. Your pet is not the reason your relationship ended. Don't take it out on them. Don't send them to a shelter where they can end up being euthanized over something that happened to you. And finally, if you can't take care of your pet anymore, if you must part ways, do your pet a favor and you find a place. You find someone to take care of it. It should never hit a shelter. Find a family member, find a friend, reach out on social media. There are ways to find someone to love and take care of that animal. Another way to be part of the solution is through being a foster or sponsor. We talked about them briefly, but I just want to remind you that if you can't permanently take care of a pet, being a foster, being a sponsor are great ways, and they will help save lives. Last slide, please. So take action. All right. If you're going to consider to add in a pet to your home, you need to at least consider adoption. Adoptions save lives. Every animal that you buy from a breeder or a pet store means an animal in a shelter will die. Uh, considering fostering and sponsoring. And finally, just don't abandon your pet. They're your pet. That's a lifelong commitment. You need to love them and cherish them the rest of their lives. And if you can't make that commitment, then you don't need an animal. Thank you for listening. Good evening.